I'm back. I know I have been gone for like a month. I have an excuse. I am in college. I just needed a mental break. But in the meantime, I've noticed that the first 10 videos have gotten a little bit more attention than I had anticipated that they might. And I'm really, my heart is warmed that there are so many people that are interested in the Federalist Papers and want to talk about them and dissect them and understand them. Some of you are doing this for college. Some of you are just doing this because you're interested in learning about the history of this great country of ours. And that's awesome. I haven't been doing nothing though. I have been doing some research. I found some really cool original publications of the Federalist Papers in the newspapers that they were originally published in. And I'm gonna dive into Federalist number 11 today, so let's get started. By the way, if you want to follow along in the Federalist Papers with me as I'm talking about the paper, I'm gonna put the little paragraph symbol with the paragraph number that I'm on right in the corner here, so that you can follow along if you want to. If you don't want to, that's okay too. Everything will still make sense. You don't have to have it in front of you. But if you would like to have it in front of you and you don't have a copy, Library of Congress has the full text available on their website. I'll leave a link for that below. Also, if you want to get the copy that I have, which is right here, this copy is available on Amazon, so I'll put a link to Amazon in the description down below as well if you'd like to get that. Please leave comments with any thoughts that you have. I personally am not a historian. I am what is the word? I am an enthusiastic amateur. So I'm doing this for my own self. I do plan to go to law school after I'm done with my undergraduate. I'm studying for a degree in economics. So it is applicable, but I don't have any classes where I'm talking about the Federalist Papers. Some of you guys have reached out to me on Instagram as well. Super cool. Love connecting with you any way that I possibly can. So let's just get started. I want to talk about this paper now. Let's go. I actually had a chance to have a 45-minute Zoom call with somebody who had found my videos, and he's actually studying for his PhD, writing a paper on the Federalists. So I was so stoked to have that insight from him, and I was so happy to have that time with him. And I'm really hoping that I will be able to interview him for the channel. I wanted to interview him for this video, but he's very busy right now. Totally understandable. He mentioned that he teaches history as well. He gave me a little bit of insight into the first 10 papers. He said that they're referred to as the philosophical opening because it really just lays the philosophical foundation for why they came up with this style of government that they did. And one of the really important themes that he said I should make sure that I focus on is the theme of the enlargement of the orbit. So basically what I gather that to mean is that a unique characteristic of a representative democracy like the one that we have is that it actually gets better with size. With a pure democracy, an original democracy like they had in ancient Greece, where everybody that voted would have to go in person and debate and talk and be there, you can really only do that on a small scale because there's only so many people that you can gather in one place and actually be able to be a part of the discussion. Think like a town hall meeting kind of thing. So you can't do that with 300 and something million people. There is no convention center that fits that many people, nor do I think that we want one. I think that if anything, the one thing that all of us have appreciated about this coronavirus time is the 6-foot social distancing rules. I'm happy that nobody is standing on top of me in line anymore. That's great. Now, Federalist 11 through 15 it's a little intimidating because it discusses the utility of the Union. We're getting into kind of like the nitty-gritty of it. The one that we're talking about today, the utility of the Union in respect to commercial relations and a navy, obviously talks about commerce and how the Navy plays into that. We're also going to talk about revenue, the economy, how to preserve the Union, all that good stuff. So as I'm sure you guys know by now, Publius, the author of the Federalist Papers, is three people. Alexander Hamilton wrote Federalist No. 11. It was published November 23rd, 1787. 3 or 4 published a week. I say that all the time, but it really is mind-blowing to be able to recall that much information in that short of a period of time with the very limited, by today's standards, resources that they had is really just an incredible feat. So we have to respect that. Now, getting into the paper, very first sentence, these papers, they always have a strong opening. They always have a strong conclusion. I'm going to animate as best I can. Let's go. The importance of the Union in a commercial light is one of those points about which there is least room to entertain a difference of opinion, and which has, in fact, commanded the most general assent of men who have any acquaintance with the subject. This paper is going to talk about the importance of commerce in the Union and why it is so important that we maintain the Union, that it would not be beneficial to anybody anywhere to split up, because Anti-Federalists wanted to split up. The adventurous spirit which distinguishes the commercial character of America has already excited uneasy sensations in several of the maritime powers of Europe. We are a brand new country in the late 1700s. We just finished a few years ago the 7 Years' War to become an independent country. And we are already showing so much promise to be a superpower in the world. And Europe currently is the superpower. European countries are the superpower. They have control of international trade. So they don't want competition. And they're getting a little bit concerned that these, very excited Americans and these ambitious Americans with their adventurous spirit are going to kind of dominate. And as we all know, we did end up dominating the international trade. We are the most powerful country in the world, and that wasn't by accident. It had very much to do with these founding fathers and federalism. So it's already recognized very early in our country's infancy that we are a force to be reckoned with, and ears are going up. They foresee the dangers that may threaten their American dominions, because at this time, if I remember correctly, they're like France and Britain, they do still have colonies here. They do still have land that they control here. We're bordered with these British and French colonies, which have all the dispositions requisite to the creation of a powerful marine. So everybody sees what's coming. Having a navy is incredibly important to having a strong commerce. And that brings us to the next point, which is the policy of fostering divisions among us and depriving us of an active commerce. This is very important, and it actually goes back to the end of Federalist No. 11. If you remember, Federalist No. 11 ended with the Latin phrase, divide et impera. If they are able to divide us, then they will be able to conquer us. We will not have the strength that we ultimately have today, which is why the Federalists are writing these papers in response to these anti-Federalist papers being published in the newspapers at the same time, because the anti-Federalist papers are suggesting that we should have 3 or 4 separate confederacies, or perhaps be 13 different states with just this Articles of Confederation as an agreement between all of us, but it's too weak. These ideas are supported by our enemies because they understand that if they can divide us, they can maintain control over the international commerce. And that would, in effect, deprive us of an active commerce. An active commerce means that we have the ability to influence international commerce. Passive commerce, which we get to later, means that we don't really have the ability to do anything. We don't have any negotiating power. They're concerned that the Americans are going to be able to have some kind of, influence over this trade, and currently they're the ones that have all the influence, so they don't want to give it up. People with power don't typically want to hand that power over to anyone else. So there's threefold purpose of preventing our interference in their navigation. They want to be able to go anywhere they want in national waters without worrying about whether or not American ships are able to take those routes as well, is what I understand. Of monopolizing the profits of our trade. They want to be able to grab hold of those profits that we are making. They want to maintain control over those profits. and of clipping the wings by which we might soar to dangerous greatness. This is a really interesting persuasive tool that Hamilton uses, and I think probably one of the reasons why people so enjoy reading his writing today. These are regular, everyday people that are reading these arguments in the newspaper, and they see the rise of the United States. They see the rise of our power. They see it happening. And it is, the eagle is our national bird, and we're, soaring to great heights. This idea that these countries are trying to clip our wings is a very, moving prospect. It's a very it's an awesome tool for him to have used to really help people picture what these other countries are trying to do if we don't manage ourselves correctly, and what they're going to be able to do if we don't organize ourselves in such a way as to maximize our power. Now, at this point, the paper starts to get a little bit difficult to understand. So I'm going to wade through this as carefully as I can. By prohibitory regulations extending at the same time throughout the states, we may oblige foreign countries to bid against each other for the privileges of our markets. So we want people to want to be a part of our trade. We want people to want to trade with us. People meaning foreign countries. And we want them to, we want to create excitement. And in excitement and in a bidding war, that means that our goods are worth more than if there's only one country in the world that wants to buy goods from us or willing to buy goods from us, we're not going to be able to sell it for that much. We're going to only be able to sell our goods to foreign nations for as much as that one foreign nation wants to buy it. But if we have multiple foreign nations bidding for our goods, then it's just going to benefit everybody. It's going to bring more money into the economy. It's going to serve the producers of those goods. Suppose, for instance, we had a government in America capable of excluding Great Britain, with whom we have at present no treaty of commerce, from all of our ports. So he's saying, think about this. Great Britain, one of the most powerful countries in the world, if not the most powerful country in the world at this time. If we had the ability to tell them that they could no longer bring their goods into our ports, what effect would that have on politics? What effect would that have on our power? It would enable us to negotiate for commercial privileges of the valuable and extensive kind. So we would be able to, inject this excitement in bidding for our business. It has been said that prohibitions on our part would produce no change in the system of Britain. So he's saying there's an argument against this idea. Us as Federalists, we believe that if we were able to do that, we would actually garner more power. Some people think it wouldn't produce any change in Britain at all, that they could just continue trading and they would do it through the medium of the Dutch. However, would not her navigation be materially injured by the loss of the important advantage of being her own carrier in that trade? And would not the principal part of its profits be intercepted by the Dutch as compensation for their agency and risk? If we were to cut off Great Britain from our ports and they were forced to trade with the Dutch, and the Dutch would then trade with the United States, then that means that the Dutch would expect some kind of compensation for them being that intermediary and them taking on the risk of trading with this country. There's risk in every business venture. So naturally, they would have to give up some of those profits to the Dutch, and the Dutch they're not gonna do it for free. They're not gonna trade with them and then sell to us for no profit. That wouldn't make any sense. When we buy goods from grocery stores, we understand that there's a profit margin in every single good that they're selling us. And the only reason they're in business is because they make a profit. So the only reason that they're selling these goods to us is because they expect to make a profit. So the Dutch would absolutely, naturally, would want to make a profit off of that trade. Would not so circuitous an intercourse facilitate the competitions of other nations by enhancing the price of British commodities in our markets? So because these British commodities would be less available in our markets because it has to go through more hands before it gets to us, and by transferring to other hands the management of this interesting branch of British commerce. This is kind of, a puzzle that we got to work through. So we have Great Britain, we've got the United States. Right now, Great Britain and the United States can trade directly. And then we got to go, and then we say, you know what, Great Britain can't bring their goods into our ports anymore. We're not going to accept British ships into our ports. We're not going to buy commodities directly from the British. So the British are going to then sell to other nations. So there's still people in the United States that would be interested in buying British goods. The supply goes down. The demand is still there. They're willing to pay. The people that want these goods are willing to pay a higher price for it. Here's the thing that I've understood about economics as I've started to study it in school and as I've started to read a lot more about it in the past few years, which is that there is no way to determine exactly what's going to happen if you were to change one variable or one aspect of the economy. There is no way, because there are so many variables, and any economic model that we have, there's a lot of assumptions built into that economic model, and those assumptions are just educated guesses. So he's speculating here on what would possibly happen if we were to cut off trade with the Brits. So I think it's important to note here that what he's saying isn't that this is going to absolutely happen, because there is no way to know. We don't have a crystal ball. Economics isn't a perfect science. Nothing is a perfect science. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of assumptions built into these economic models. So he's just suggesting that there's going to be repercussions if we were to have the ability to cut off Great Britain's trade. So I guess how I interpret that is, just imagine we had the power to do this. Look at how much we could influence international trade. And that's what it comes down to. We have the power to enormously impact international trade, and that's the important part. We want to have that power, and we also want Great Britain and these other powerful European countries to know that we have that power. And that's an important aspect, is that these other countries have to know that we have that power. A mature consideration of the objects suggested by these questions will justify a belief that the real disadvantages to Britain from such a state of things, conspiring with the prepossessions of a great part of the nation in favor of the American trade, and with the importunities of the West India Islands, would produce a relaxation in her present system, and would let us into the enjoyment of privileges in the markets of those islands elsewhere, from which our trade would derive the most substantial benefits. Now, this is the part that I think it's important to have some historical context about the trade that was happening with the West Indies. If I were to try to dig into this video might never get made, because this is not my area of expertise. This is an instance where I would love to get some feedback on I would love to see some comments kind of filling in the blanks here. But basically, what we're seeing here is, I know that there's trade. What I do know is that there's trade happening through the West Indies. So let's kind of pick this sentence apart. If the United States can have this, really enormous impact and influence over international trade, a big disadvantage to Britain would be the opportunity of trade in the West Indies. So there's a lot of trade going through the West India Islands, and it would produce a relaxation in her present system. So I'm assuming, from what I can gather, from what I know, that the relaxation in our present system is that Great Britain pretty much has control over the West Indies. They have control over that trade. They have control over that market. But it's a very important market. I'll put up on the screen where the West Indies are located in relation to the United States and Great Britain. I think that'll probably kind of put some pieces together. But it would let us enjoy some of those privileges of those markets. And there's a lot of trade going into these islands. And that is where our trade would derive the most substantial benefit. So he presents these questions prior to this about the possibilities of what could happen if we had the ability to say no to trade with Great Britain. He suggests some other instances that have to do with the Dutch and going through other hands. And then he says that the real kicker would be the West Indies. that if we can have some control over the trade in the West Indies, we could garner a lot of power in terms of commerce. A further resource for influencing the conduct of European nations toward us in this respect would arise from the establishment of a federal navy. So this is where he introduces the navy, the idea of why it's so important for us to have a navy. More peculiarly, I know how to say that word. More peculiarly, we all have these days where we just can't pronounce words that we normally can pronounce. My mouth isn't making those noises, sorry. More peculiarly, the case in relation to operations in the West Indies. So he's talking specifically, I can say that word. Specifically is a much easier word to say. Specifically, having a navy would really have an impact on the trade through the West Indies. A situation so favorable would enable us to bargain with great advantage for commercial privileges. A price would be set not only upon our friendship, but upon our neutrality, and we would become the arbiter of Europe in America. This is important. We're going to come back to this idea again as we move through the paper, but this is very important. A price would be set not only upon our friendship. So not only do other foreign nations want to bid for our business, but also they would have a vested interest in seeing us be neutral. We would become the arbiter of Europe in America. We would be the judge with the gavel. We would be the ones that can say what Europe can do and what they cannot do as it relates to the United States. But it's so important that we remain a union, and a strong union at that, and have a federal navy, because the other option, if we were to be separate confederacies, is each confederacy, at least those of the confederacies that are along the coast, they would all have to have their own unique navy, right? 4 different navies in much smaller territories than it would be if we're a union, if we're all connected. Consider how much weaker these 4 different navies would be as opposed to one federal navy. So we would be able to dictate the terms of trade in America. But in reverse, the rivalships of the parts would make them checks upon each other. So if we weren't going to be a union, if we were 4 separate confederacies and each confederacy had their own navy, what he's saying is that we would then be checking each other. The different confederacies would be worried about their neighboring nations, right? Because that's what these different confederacies would be. It doesn't matter if we have an agreement to work together. The fact of the matter is we'd be 3 or 4 sovereign nations, and we would end up fighting with each other, and we would frustrate all the tempting advantages which nature has kindly placed within our reach. The nature of our nation, being together, being on one contiguous continent, working together. This is a gift that Providence has given to us. We have this gift of having an incredibly strong nation if we work together. If we don't work together, we're going to be fighting each other, and it's not going to be to the advantage of anybody. And it's actually going to hurt us on the national stage. Our commerce would be a prey to the wanton intermeddlings of all nations at war with each other, who have nothing to fear from us, would with little scruple or remorse supply their wants by depredations on our property. If we cannot protect ourselves, number one, we won't be able to make any demands. Nobody's going to listen to a small little country that they can easily overthrow and then just steal the property from. Why would Great Britain and France and these strong European nations, what motivation would they have to negotiate with the states or with the confederacies if they knew that they could just overthrow them? They already have camps here. They already have settlements here. So what benefit would it be to them to negotiate with us if they can just overthrow us because we're divided? It's easy to command us. Here is this super important sentence and this super important idea. The rights of neutrality. So the right to not fight, the right to not have an opinion. Important. The rights of neutrality will only be respected when they are defended by an adequate power. A nation, despicable by its weakness, forfeits even the privilege of being neutral. This is such an important idea that we're going to see come up again and again as we go through these papers. And it's very central to the idea of federalism, which is that you don't get to make the decisions that you want to make. You don't get to have the power and the control that you want to have over your nation and the decisions that your nation makes. You will be forced to do things for your country that you don't want to do to the benefit of other stronger foreign powers if we do not have the power to stand up for ourselves. We need to have adequate power. It's not about imperialism. It's not about being able to conquer other lands. It isn't about that. I guess to an extent it is. I will concede that there is some aspects in there. Can't ignore that fact. But even just existing in the way that we want to exist, in the way that we decide is best for us, having the ability to make the decisions for ourselves, for what's best for our citizenry, for our country, is dependent upon the fact that we have an adequate power to protect the right to make those decisions for ourselves. An active commerce, an extensive navigation, and a flourishing marine would then be the inevitable offspring of a moral and physical necessity. We need these things in order to maintain this ability to be neutral if we want to be. So we need to be able to travel and trade with whichever foreign nations we want. We need to be able to dictate those terms. We need to have a flourishing Navy, a strong federal Navy. We're going to be stronger together. It's necessary if we want to be able to enjoy all of the privileges that we have. We might defy the little arts of the little politicians to control or vary the irresistible and unchangeable course of nature. To me, this is a really important aspect of federalism and of the ideas and the philosophy of the founding fathers. I say this all the time. What I am so impressed about when it comes to the philosophy of the founding fathers, so they didn't structure the government so that they could say, well, this is how we think people ought to behave. This is how we think that society ought to be. They recognize that people are going to be the way that people are going to be. There is innate human psychology. People are motivated by incentives. People are motivated by there's just certain aspects of human psychology that you can't change. Just people are people. They're going to be people. And I think what's really important about the federalism and about the ideas of the founding fathers is that they work to build a system of government around human psychology rather than building a system of government to control human psychology. And what I'm interpreting that he's saying here is that politicians are going to tell you, and he says little, and that's another fantastic persuasive tool that he's used. He's a master persuader. It's a tool that he uses to not only help the reader visualize these politicians, but you can almost picture a little man in his little suit standing on his little soapbox. They come up with these ideas of how government should work. And, if we could only get people to do this, then government would work great this way. But that's not how human psychology works. You just simply cannot change certain aspects of human psychology. The most successful politicians are those politicians that offer some radical change, some radical ideas. That's what politicians are in the business of doing. I mean, a politician that comes in and says that I'm going to maintain the status quo, who votes for those people? Nobody votes for those people. It's exciting to see somebody that's saying, I'm going to make things better, right? And so he's saying that there are politicians that say, well, if we're three or four separate confederacies, then we're going to avoid a monarchy, which is just what we escaped. We don't want a federal government. We're worried about the executive branch and the president. They're going to turn into a monarch. all that stuff. We've discussed that in previous papers. But there's an unchangeable course of nature, and that's the nature of human psychology. But in a state of disunion, these combinations might exist and might operate with success, meaning that we would be susceptible to foreign nations coming in, stealing our property, dictating our terms of commerce to us. They would in all probability combine to embarrass our navigation in such a manner as would in effect destroy it and confine us to a passive commerce. If you're looking at the text, you notice passive commerce, just like active commerce was, is in all caps. Passive commerce means that we don't get to dictate the terms of our trade. Somebody else is dictating it to us, and we just have to follow the rules. We want to make the rules. That's the nature of active commerce, is that we get to set the rules. That unequaled spirit of enterprise, which signalizes the genius of the American merchants and navigators, and which is in itself an inexhaustible mine of national wealth, would be stifled and lost. We have a gold mine sitting here with the possibilities of our enterprise and of our commerce and of foreign commerce and foreign trade. That's a gold mine sitting there waiting for us to enjoy the fruits of it. But if we were confined to passive commerce, if we were confined to just following the terms of trade set by other foreign powers, it would be lost. Poverty and disgrace would overspread a country, which with wisdom might make herself the admiration and envy of the world. Do we want to be relegated to poverty? Do we want to have 4 poor countries that can't stick up for themselves, that don't have the power to stick up for themselves? That's why I think it's so funny when, people on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, suggest on Twitter that, we just need to secede from the union. We need to separate the red states from the blue states. It wouldn't work. You don't get to have the power that the United States has and be separated. We are the superpower that we are because we are a union. And with wisdom, with the right tools, and if we do it the right way, we will become the admiration and envy of the world. And we have become the admiration and envy of the world. We get 50% of immigration comes to the United States because this is where people want to live. I mean, this is where people want to come. My husband is an immigrant himself. He came from the Middle East. This is where he wanted to come. This is where opportunity lies. And that's what the Federalists wanted to make. They wanted to create a place that was full of opportunity and riches, and everybody has the ability to make it. So now we move into the importance of the Mississippi River. And this is probably another section that I should know more about if I'm going to be speaking on it, but I'm just going to come right out and tell you that I don't know a whole heck of a lot about it, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say about it. Rights of great moment to the trade of America, which are the rights of the Union. So let's look at it this way. The Mississippi runs through the entire Union. If we were to break up the Union into different separate confederacies, now we've got fights over the Mississippi, navigation of the Western Lakes and Mississippi. Dissolution of the Confederacy would give room for delicate questions concerning the future existence of these rights. Anybody in real estate will tell you that water rights are incredibly important. And that's what he's talking about here, is that if we were to dissolve, if we were to become separate confederacies, naturally the rights to traveling the Mississippi up and down would come into question. The disposition of Spain with regard to the Mississippi needs no comment. Now, I don't know the specifics of this, but I'm very curious when he says that it needs no comment. So obviously, people of the time know that there's something to do with Spain and Mississippi. I'd love to know. Please put it in the comments if you know it. France and Britain are concerned with us in the fisheries and is the utmost moment to their navigation. Again, like I said, France and Britain have territories here. They're using the Mississippi. We need to have control over this baby, okay? We need to have control over this waterway. They should be disposed to exclude from the lists such dangerous competitors. We should have the power to say that the rights to the Mississippi belong to the Union and nobody else. We need to be setting the terms. It goes back to this idea, the act of commerce, of us being able to set the terms of trade. This branch of trade ought not to be considered a partial benefit. All the navigating states advantageously participate in it, and under circumstances of a greater extension of mercantile capital would not be unlikely to do it. So this Mississippi is very important to trade throughout the Union, and it's not some aside that might be a cherry on top benefit. It's actually incredibly important to the trade in this country. And it will become a universal resource. To the establishment of a navy, it must be indispensable. Water rights are incredibly important. Water rights are always important. To this great national object, a navy, the Union will contribute in various ways. So now we're going to get into how exactly the Union will contribute to a strong navy. A navy of the United States, as it would embrace the resources of all meaning every state in the Union, is an object far less remote than a navy of any single state or partial confederacy, which would only embrace the resources of a part. So like I said earlier, a navy that belongs to a single confederacy or a single state is obviously going to be a lot weaker than a navy that belongs to all of us collectively. The more southern states furnish tar, pitch, and turpentine. Their wood is more solid and lasting than the wood in the north. And if we have ships that are chiefly constructed of southern wood, would be a signal importance either in the view of naval strength or of national economy. Seamen must chiefly be drawn from the northern hive. They, by a kind of reaction, mutually beneficial, promote each other. So we have the tools to build ships in the South. We have the tar, the pitch, the turpentine. They have solid wood, much more solid wood that's growing in the South than growing in the North. But the North provides the men. They have stronger men. I don't know why. But this is the argument that Hamilton is making here, which is that there are resources in both the North and the South that if they were to be split, then the Northern Navy would have certain disadvantages and the Southern Navy would have certain disadvantages. But together, we make up the disadvantages of each other and we become stronger. And then what that says to the national stage is that we have great naval strength. So what this says to foreign powers is that we have great naval strength and we have a great national economy. Having strong ships at this time, they're made out of wood. We don't make ships out of wood anymore, obviously. But it would signal to the world our strength. An unrestrained intercourse between the states themselves will advance the trade of each by an interchange of their respective productions, not only for the supply of reciprocal wants at home, but for the exportation of foreign market. There's two important messages here. The first is that we need unrestricted trade between the states. Not only would having open commerce between states advance the trade for us, but also for the exportation of foreign markets. Commercial enterprise will have a much greater scope from the diversity in the production of different states. So this means that we will benefit because like he said earlier, the southern states have certain advantages by the nature of the resources available there. Northern states have their own advantages. If we're all able to combine those advantages together, then we're all going to benefit from that because we're going to have a much greater diversity. The variety, not less than the value, of products for exportation contributes to the activity of foreign commerce. And this is where we start to get into the understanding of macro level economy. It can be conducted upon much better terms with a large number of materials of a given value than with a small number of materials of the same value arising from the competitions of trade and from the fluctuations of market. We would rather, for example, have 100 goods worth $10 each than 10 goods worth $100 each. So if we only have 10 goods to offer on the stage of foreign commerce, sometimes those goods are not going to be in as high of demand. There's fluctuations in the market for every good. The risk is going to be spread out among those 100 products. For example, obviously we have a lot more to offer than 100 products, but just for the sake of simplicity and understanding the concept, the risk is spread out among 100 products rather than among 10 products. So while today those 100 products may be worth $10, if some of those products go down in value, it's less likely that all of the products are going to go down in value at the same time. There's going to be fluctuations throughout. That's why money managers and people that build investment portfolios, they spread the risk out by not investing all in one company. Because if you put all of your eggs in one basket, you can drop that basket and all of your eggs break. But if you have your eggs in a bunch of different baskets, you can drop one basket and still have the rest of your eggs. The speculative trader will at once perceive the force of these observations. So the speculative trader is an investor. That's what you do when you invest in companies, is you speculate on the future success of these goods. And these investors are going to understand that if we have a greater variety of goods to offer on the international scale, they will acknowledge that the aggregate balance of the commerce of the United States would bid fair to be much more favorable than that of the 13 states without union or with partial unions. So if we are to have unity of commercial as well as political interests, this can only result from a unity of government. We can only enjoy all of these benefits if we have a united government, if we have a federal government. The world may politically as well as geographically be divided into 4 parts, each having a distinct set of interests. If we split up, everybody's going to have their own interests, and those interests are never going to completely align. And Europe will be able to extend her dominion over all of them. Instead of one big, strong nation that can extend our dominion over Europe or dictate the terms of trade with Europe, it would mean that Europe would be able to then dictate the terms of trade over each separate confederacy or state. They'd be the mistress of the world. Men, admired as profound philosophers, have in direct terms attributed to her inhabitants a physical superiority, and have gravely asserted that all animals, and with them the human species, degenerate in America, that even dogs cease to bark after having breathed a while in our atmosphere. This is what some European philosophers think of America. Very graphic picture that he places in the reader's mind. It belongs to us to vindicate the honor of the human race, and the union will enable us to do it. Let the 13 states, bound together in a strict and indissoluble union, concur in erecting one great American system, superior to the control of all transatlantic force or influence, and able to dictate the terms of the connection between the old and new world. It is our position to be able to dictate those terms of trade, not only in terms of commerce, but in terms of power, in terms of neutrality, in terms of everything. We want to have a say in the world. It's our moral obligation to support the people and the citizenry in this country, and the best way that we can do that is with a federal government. That is the end of this paper. I really hope you enjoyed it. This was one of those papers where, and I had to read this thing like 5 times to be able to really wrap my head around it. And there's even pieces of it that obviously I don't fully grasp. Quite a lot of us that don't just have a bunch of uninformed opinions that we like to tweet about and post on Facebook and argue with strangers that haven't done a lick of research beyond social media sites. But it really helps you to understand just how important the style of government is and how much influence it has on our standard of living and how good our lives are. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe because I'm gonna be putting out more videos, and I'm hoping to do it at a faster pace than I have been doing it. You know, it's hard sitting here talking to a camera by yourself. It's like so much harder than I thought it would be when I tackled this project from the beginning, but I'm glad that I'm pushing through. And I might not be pushing through if it wasn't for all of your guys' kind comments and interactions. So please keep leaving comments. Send these videos to your friends. Like the video, that really helps me out a lot so that other people can find these Federalist videos. I know there's not a whole heck of a lot out there. I was so surprised when I started reading the Federalist Papers. I went to go look for Federalist paper videos. I couldn't find very many of them, and the ones that I did find were honestly kind of boring. So I hope that this video isn't boring. I hope that it's engaging enough for you to want to keep watching and see what's going to come out next. You can follow me on my other social medias too. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'll leave those links down below as well. It's also, if you go to my channel, all the links to these social medias are in the channel banner too. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless America.